Well, the people in power, whether red or blue, they could not care less about Texas, me and you. They created this give me country that don't value hard work. For a Texan to survive, all we need are some seeds and dirt. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save your country before it's long gone. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save your country before it's long gone. We believe in family and we value our community. Gladly lend a helping hand to a neighbor in need. And we don't believe that government should provide for all of society's needs. No, it's the pride of a Texan to give to others voluntarily. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Gotta save your country before it's long gone. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Gotta save your country before it's long gone. They like our tax dollars and they love our natural resources. They don't want to see us driving trucks, they'd rather see us riding horses. And now they want to ban our guns, you know, especially the ones that look scary. But may I remind you of the Gonzales Cannon and the Alamo heroes we buried. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save our country before it's long gone. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save our country before it's long gone. This last verse is straight from the Texas Constitution, Article 1, Section 1 and 2. Look it up. Texas is an independent state, yet presently we suffer. We no longer possess the right to locally self-govern. And now it's time as a people in which all political power is inherent. And in such manner we find expedient, we reform or abolish our government. I said, Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save your country before it's long gone. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save your country before it's long gone.
Hey, good evening, everyone. It's that time again, right? Time for a little late night coffee talk. This is it's going to be a weird one for me. I don't normally have guests. Sometimes, on occasion, right? If we do the guests and we need interview time, we schedule a webinar or something special like that. But tonight, apparently, the conversation over the webinar that we had the other night was absolute and pure fire. And the good Dr. Matt Qvortrup agreed to come on Coffee Talk to essentially continue the conversation, to get some of the questions we weren't able to get to, and to spend some time with you guys in a little more relaxed setting. So we're going to do that. And of course, we had some bombshell news drop about the Facebook lawsuit today. So I called our attorney, Paul Davis, and he sent me the voicemail. And he sent me a text. He says, "Hey, I'm in the middle of working out. I'll call you in 10 minutes. And I told him that no one likes a bragger, right? It's just the way it is. Don't come in here showing off your stamina, right? Don't do that. Anyway, he is going to come on. He's actually on his podcast right now. So he's going to be coming on here in a minute. So I'm going to try to cram as much of what we need to cover for my mid-week coffee break as I can up front. So we'll have a lot of time to spend with Dr. Qvortrup, and we may go into a little bit of overtime. So just be prepared. Hopefully you have your cup of coffee. All right. For those of you just joining us and wondering what in the world is happening here, I am Daniel Miller, president of the Texas Nationalist movement. And this is Late Night Coffee Talk. This is that time in the middle of the week where I take a break away from work and get some things off my chest, right? Pour another cup of coffee, right? This is not the same one. I don't just drink a cup of coffee. Pour some more coffee and share this time with you guys. Do a little decompress, answer your questions. You guys really drive it in the comments and via your email. So we'll be doing a lot of that tonight. Of course, we'll be trying to juggle everything that's going on, because honestly, I could have started an hour early. I really could have. I could have started an hour early. I mean, it's been that kind of a week so far, and really since the last time we were together for Coffee Talk, there's been just a ton of stuff that happened. So I tell you what, let's get the housekeeping out of the way. I'll start working on some of the things that I want to talk about, which is really what's happening on social media and some of these elected officials. Ooh, really, really ridiculous. All right. Housekeeping. For those of you that are joining us on either of the YouTube channels, you can post your questions and comments there in chat. And of course, on the TNM's YouTube channel, Super Chat is active. So if you'd like to make a contribution there, feel free to do so. Helps us continue to get the word out. And, we got a lot of work to do. Legislative session's coming in no time at all. And we've still got tons and tons of work to do. Although a lot of it's already started. But drop your questions in there. Additionally, if you're watching on either of the Facebook pages, you can comment there, and we'll see those. They all aggregate in one central spot, and we'll be able to see them, and we'll try to get to them. And of course, those questions can be for me, Dr. Qvortrup, Paul Davis, when he gets here. Paul's only going to be with us for like 5 or 10 minutes, right? So just, keep that in mind. Just talk about the lawsuit. If you're watching on LinkedIn, I don't even know if that aggregates into chat. It might not. I really don't know. But I do know that if you're watching on the TNM mobile app or on the Roku channel, it does not aggregate. You're just going to get to watch the show. So it's going to be fun. All right. Oh, yeah. And I almost forgot. You can always email your questions to the email address that you'll see on the crawler at the bottom of the screen, coffeetalk@thetnm.org. That is coffeetalk@thetnm.org. All right. Let's get down to it. Let's not start with Facebook, because I want to wait for Paul to get here so he'll be able to see it, or be able to kind of walk you through this process. I could do it, but it's a little much, right? He'll be able to explain to you. And honestly, he's the attorney. I don't know what I should say and not say. I mean, I have a pretty good idea of what I can say, but sometimes I may say something that I don't need to say. And so that's why we have an attorney. I mean, we're engaged in suing a mega corporation. So, we want to be as careful as possible. All right. That being said, wow. Okay. So for those of you that are engaging with the TNM on social media, let me tell you, our team is doing a phenomenal job. Excuse me. Our team is doing a phenomenal job on social media. And here's how you can tell. Today, of all days, on Twitter, we had 3 elected officials decide to they wanted to take us on, right? That they wanted to come out and they wanted to take on the Texiteers. They wanted to come after me specifically, right? I made a tweet, said day 1 of the legislative session, we're going to begin by demanding a vote on TEXIT, right? Something that we're actually doing right now. But we needed to let them know that day 1 of the legislative session to be expecting all the Texiteers to ramp it up, to wind it up, to demand that they uphold their oaths to Article 1, Section 2 of the Texas Constitution. And of course, on the left there, you have State Representative Jeff Leach, who has never been a friend of ours. I mean, when Kyle Biederman filed the Texas Independence Referendum Act last session, probably outside of somebody like Chris Patty, somebody who kind of showed his backside an awful lot. I mean, look, if you don't support it, that's fine. Let's have some honest dialogue about it. But he decided to fire off. But really, the gentleman on the right-hand side, State Representative Jared Patterson, is the one who decided to kick it off. He retweeted my tweet and said, tell me you don't know anything about the legislature without telling me anything. You don't know anything about the legislature. And what's funny about it is, I've been working at legislative action since before Jared Patterson was in the Texas legislature, right? So, I mean, the guy was an absolute clown, right? I mean, it wasn't necessary. If he doesn't support it, say you don't support it. Let's move on. But these guys, and of course, I didn't cover Justin Holland there in the middle, right? Justin Holland, another state representative, one who got very confrontational with me at the Capitol last session over nothing, just having a conversation, and got, pretty aggressive, which is fine. I mean, if he thinks he's going to intimidate me, he's not. But just super hyper aggressive and just ridiculous, right? So we've got these 3, and for some reason today the planets aligned, and these 3 decided to come tackle. Now, my guess is yesterday I had responded to something Justin Holland had tweeted, essentially saying that he doesn't need to follow the Republican Party priorities or the platform. He's just going to listen to his constituents. And so I asked a serious question. Frankly, it's a question that every one of us should be asking our elected representatives in the House and the Senate. And it's this: if you say that you are going to listen to your constituents, how many do you need to hear from before you consider something a priority? Or is that just kind of a put off? Is that just like a blow off line, right? There's something you say just to get rid of people, to insinuate that they, that you really listen to the constituents, but you don't, right? You just kind of give it to them as a throwaway line, just as a brush off to say, you know what, I only listen to my constituents, and my constituents aren't saying what you're saying. And so therefore, so what do? Well, you pin them down, right? If you say you listen to your constituents, if that's indeed what you are saying, that you listen to your constituents, how many do you need to hear from for it to make a difference, right? Give me a number, give me a goal. But you know how these guys are. They love to be, like trying to nail Jell-O to the wall. And that's because many of them have spines made of Jell-O, right? But that's sort of the attitude that they have. They just kind of blow it off. But, people persisted. People latched on to that question and continued to ask. And what you heard from Justin Holland was nothing. So I'm guessing that Justin wham to his buddies, right? They're picking on me. Come help. I'm being bullied on social media. And so right out of the gate this morning, we've got Jared Patterson's tweet, And then Jeff Leach decides to jump in, right? He decides to jump in. And what they essentially did was trigger a major crap storm on Twitter, where the progressives and the neo-Marxists were coming out cheering them on, odd fellows, right? And the Texiteers were jumping in and making the case, right? Answering questions. And when that went, so this went on all day until this thing happened right here. So so this is what it you guys will appreciate this, right? So Patterson was essentially saying that he was not listening, or that he would be listening to the constituents. So he's like, no, that same line I just said. And so my response was pretty simple, right? This is not some knee-jerk reaction to Joe Biden being president. This is something that people want. They want a vote on TEXIT. But the problem is that he's never had the conversation with his constituents who support it to find out what their real motivations are. And so I just simply asked him, would you be willing to take a meeting to hear them out? Now, here's where everyone, particularly in his district, should be really upset. He says, not true. I've had conversations with both of my constituents who support leaving the United States. What he's insinuating is what I went around for a very long time in various speeches on this webcast, whatever you want to call it, over and over and over, and said is people like Jared Patterson say that you don't exist, right? So when I go to his district, or Justin Holland's district, or Jeff Leach's district, or any of these places around Texas, and I start off the event and I ask the question, who in this room is ready for TEXIT? And the room explodes, right? And these are not TNM meetings. These are meetings where other organizations are inviting me to speak, and the room explodes with TEXIT support. What I tell those people is, you have elected officials in Austin who say that you don't exist. They are in this state of denial. They deny that this is even an issue, even though polling shows that it's an issue, even though, the anecdotes are there where their districts are exploding with pro-TEXIT growth. And at a minimum, the people are just demanding the right to have a vote. They just want to be able to be heard. I'm even seeing people that are opposed to TEXIT in these social media scrums say, look, I don't support it, but I don't see why it would hurt to put it on a ballot. I don't see what the problem is. But this is the inconsistency of the position of those like Jeff Leach and Jared Patterson and Justin Holland, who deny that it's even an issue, even though the way our legislation is written, it costs absolutely nothing to put it on a ballot, because it goes on the constitutional amendment election ballot, right? It costs nothing. Even though there's no cost associated with it, even though they say no one supports it, they still don't want to be found out. They don't want to put it on a ballot and have everyone have the debate and ultimately have a say in our political destiny. So they don't understand the inconsistency of their position. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Maybe they just don't care. But at the end of the day, the thing that we have to do is we have to be heard. They have to hear us. They have to know that there are enough Texans out there that want to see this happen. And if you listen to the webinar with Dr. Qvortrup earlier this week, I guess 2 nights ago, you heard him say as much, right? If your politician is a windsock, you have to be the wind. You've heard us say it in the TNM over and over and over. If they will not operate from a position of principle, right? If they cannot rationalize or have a logical argument as to why this vote shouldn't take place, right? But if they do not operate from a position of principle, then that means they're operating from political expediency. And so to win TEXIT, and especially to get the TEXIT vote, we have to make it politically expedient. And how we do that is there has to be something on the other end of this if they do not support the vote. There has to be political consequences to this. There has to be. So, in the spirit of what Jared Patterson said, the fact that he spoke with two people, both of the TEXIT supporters in his district, I'm going to encourage people in his district to call him. And not just people in his district, if you support TEXIT at all. Remember, they take an oath to support the Texas Constitution. And what we're asking for is our inalienable right under Article 1, Section 2. So I would encourage all of you, I would encourage every single one of you to pick up the phone and call Jared Patterson. State Representative Jared Patterson needs to hear from you, and especially if you live in his district, because according to him, you do not exist. All right. So, we can talk more about the social media scrum later, but I would encourage you, engage with the TNM on social media. Everything that we're doing, we're all over the place, and it has been probably a banner week for us, reaching brand new people through digital outreach. So get that done. All right. I see waiting down there is a man fresh out of his own podcast. I'm going to go ahead and bring him on now. It is none other than our attorney.
Hope I hear you. Let me put my headphones in. You caught me off guard.
See, you got to be ready, man. You got to be ready. You got to be ready.
I got to take my cough syrup too, because you got me laughing so hard. I start coughing. I got the worst allergies right now. So,
suddenly I feel like
look away.
Look, yeah. Now I suddenly feel like Joe Pesci in was it good? Am I here to amuse you? Am I here? So
yes, that's it's a live podcast. I mean, I just jumped on, so you got to give me a little more time to prepare. But it's okay. It's okay.
Well,
do you remember the Joe Pesci? Do you remember the Joe Pesci show on Saturday Night Live?
No.
Do you remember that skit? Oh man, that was hilarious. Oh well, it's okay. We can do that bit another time. I'll explain it to you.
Super. All right. So look, I've got you for a short amount of time, but I appreciate you doing this. I know you just kicked off your podcast. Go ahead and tell everybody about your podcast real quick before we kick into what's going on with Facebook.
Oh yeah, thanks for giving me that opportunity. So I had been doing, my podcast is called Paul Davis Uncanceled. The idea for the show is I got canceled after January 6th. I was there outside the Capitol protesting legally, and I lost my job and lost a lot of other things. And so this is my way of saying I am uncanceled. I'm uncanceling myself. God has uncanceled me. We're not afraid to speak the truth. We're going to keep speaking the truth. And so, it's a lot. My show is it's a lot of news and legal analysis of the news. And then I'm going to have a lot of different guests on. I'm having Clay Clark next week, which is going to be very exciting. And then we're going to have a doctor from the new Peter McCullough's new platform, the medical platform called The Wellness Company. We're going to have one of the top doctors on from that. So you can find us if you just go to any of my social media accounts at Fired Up TX Lawyer. You can find me on all platforms and just go to my link tree and you'll be able to find where my podcast is.
Super. And on your link tree, is that the link to the GoFundMe to get you a Texas flag background?
Oh my gosh. I know.
Asking for a friend.
No, I know, man. It's on my to-do list. I have a to-do list. It is on my to-do list. Go get a Texas flag. I used to have one. I don't know what happened to it, but I just ran out of time today. So I'm going with the American flag. I still love America. Sorry, not sorry.
Rock and roll. Yeah, nobody's saying anything about that. I'm just saying something a little more. Your social media handle's Fired Up Texas Lawyer. I'm just saying.
Right.
It's brand consistency. Okay, yes. So let's talk about Facebook. So we released the news today that Facebook has essentially removed the restrictions, but the case is not over. And so I have been inundated with questions today about, okay, what is actually going on? What is this thing with the federal court? On and on and on. So I figured I would bring you on to encapsulate it. And the other thing too is, I don't want to say anything that I'm not supposed to say. So Paul, can you please tell everyone what in the world is going on with our lawsuit against Meta?
Smart man. So I'll take my glasses off for a second. So, I have to wear the blue light glasses because if I don't, I won't sleep if I'm online too long before bed. But and we need our lawyer to sleep, right? You know, that's how I write good legal briefs. But so quick legal lesson. We have two court systems in this country. Generally speaking, you have your federal court system, you have your state court system. So, Texas has it's the trial courts, which are going to be your state district court. That's the lowest level court. Then you got the appellate courts, and then you got the Supreme Court of Texas. And then the federal court system, you have your federal district court. Then you have the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. That's over Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. So our federal cases in Texas feed into the Fifth Circuit. That's why you always hear about the Fifth Circuit because you live in Texas. And then from there you go up to the Supreme Court. So federal courts have jurisdiction over federal issues. That's the easiest way to explain it. So if you have a federal cause of action, like I just filed a lawsuit actually working with the America Project, which is Patrick Byrne's organization. We filed a lawsuit against the Biden administration to force Biden to enforce federal law at the border and protect our border. So that is a federal question. So that is directly filed in federal court. So you get in federal court, one, if you have a federal question, which I just unpacked, like it has to do with the United States Code or some regulation or a question of constitutional law. Then the other way you get in federal court is if you don't have a federal question, you can still get in federal court on what's called diversity jurisdiction. And diversity jurisdiction just means, excuse me, my allergies are really bad this week, so I apologize. I'm all stuffed up and coughing. But diversity jurisdiction exists when you have complete diversity of citizenship as far as states go. So Texas Nationalist movement is based in Texas, obviously, and it'd be weird if it wasn't, right? And Meta is based in California. So you have complete diversity between the parties, but that's not the end of the story. You have to have also at least $75,000 in controversy. So if you file a lawsuit against somebody in another state in state court and the amount in controversy is over $75,000, then the defendant has the option of removing that case to federal court. And that's what Meta has done here. They have a third theory as to why they removed it, which I'll talk about in a second. But those are kind of the two basic ones. And so when you file, when the defendant removes a lawsuit from state court, all they have to do literally is just file a notice of removal in the state court, state why they're removing it, why there's federal court jurisdiction, then it's automatically removed to federal court. There's nothing we can do about that except file a motion to remand, which is the next step.
Okay, fantastic. So essentially where we're at, and it became pretty clear today when we released the news that we asked for what is fairly, I guess a settlement that is reasonable, right? Attorney's fees and an apology, and Meta told us to go pound sand. So I think that the die has been cast here. So just really briefly, and then I'll let you jump off of here. For those that are concerned about this, what is happening next? What should they expect to see next?
Yeah. So, as you and I talked about, no, I don't think either of us were surprised that Meta told us to go pound sand, right? I mean, we were asking for a public apology and, them to pay our attorney's fees. Really not a whole lot to ask because, I mean, we don't have extraordinary attorney's fees at this point, but It was kind of funny because their lawyer called me yesterday and was like, well, I can't remember how he phrased it, but it was kind of funny. Yeah, actually, it's kind of like their lawyers are actually pretty nice people as far as lawyers go, which is always great if you're, I hate working with a-hole, opposing counsel. It just makes everything so much more miserable. But called me yesterday and was just like, I bet you can guess what, Meta said. I was like, yeah, go pound sand. I mean, we had a good laugh about it. And so the next step is they have given us, it's the holidays coming up. There's a lot going on. And so their lawyer just said, hey, let's agree to a briefing schedule, briefing is when you're, researching and writing the issues for the court. You brief the court on the legal issues. So they have granted us 30 days to respond to. Actually, let me back up. They filed a motion to transfer venue. So after they removed to federal district court, which they have the right to file that, we have the right to fight that and get it back to state court, which we're absolutely going to do. Then they filed a motion to transfer venue because I think I mentioned this on a previous show. There's a clause in the Facebook user terms that says you got to sue them in California, but then we have the Texas law that says, it basically says social media platforms can't contract around the Texas law. The problem is the Texas legislature could have been a little more precise. They could have made it very explicit. It seems pretty clear to me. I mean, I don't think you could really read Texas HB 20, which is what the law is called in session, and come to any other conclusion that these lawsuits have to be brought in the state of Texas. Especially it's California. Like you can't. I told the judge, when I brought the Chad Prather lawsuit, I was like, Judge, ask any Texas legislator that voted for this law if they thought that these lawsuits would be able to be brought in California, and nobody would say yes because they would be, run out of the state on a rail, probably tarred and feathered. But they're trying to remove to Northern District of California, their home turf, pursuant to their user terms. And we're going to argue that that is against Texas public policy, as it's been well stated by the Texas legislature.
Yeah, it's totally against what goes for normal legislative intent, right?
Exactly.
And so look, Paul, I just want to tell you on behalf of the organization how much I appreciate you going out there and doing battle for us. I know dealing with these guys is a bit of a pain, and I know that we're swimming in some uncharted waters, but I'm excited. Look, I think it's no coincidence that Facebook's removal of the link and them asking us to drop the lawsuit. I think it's no coincidence that it happened right after one of those Twitter files drops of collusion between the federal government and their allies inside of Twitter. And I suspect that as this lawsuit moves forward, we might uncover that very same thing happening at Facebook. And so I'm ready to go do battle for our people.
I totally agree. And this is an interesting development that happened today. So, last Friday when I called you and told you that Meta had lifted the restrictions, I have my own personal lawsuit against Meta as well up here in Collin County. And I noticed today, one of the key ways that I know my account is being restricted on Instagram, the easiest way to tell is my story views, because my story views are normally over 1,000 on any given day. And then one day back in June, they all of a sudden just dropped down to 150 on average, or at or around. And it's been that way ever since. Guess what? Yesterday, they went back up to almost over 1,000. And so after I filed my lawsuit, so it's kind of the same thing that's happening to TNM. They're actually lifting their restrictions, it seems like. So it'll be interesting to see, but to put it all, to kind of tie it all up together, in a bow, what to expect in this lawsuit next. So over the next few weeks, we will be researching the issue of whether we can remand to state court. That's going to be, I feel confident that we can defeat the diversity jurisdiction question. We're not asking for damages. Basically, they're trying to say that because we're asking for attorney's fees, that's going to be in excess of $75,000. But, I don't think Texas Nationalist movement plans on spending $75,000 on this. If y'all want to pay me $75,000, I'm fine with that. But I don't think we're going to have that amount of attorney's fees, And so they have to rely on all this other stuff that doesn't really matter. So I think we're going to win on that. And then I think we're going to win on the federal question issue, which I mentioned. And then I don't know on the Class Action Fairness Act. I have to research that. I think I looked at it briefly and I felt like we were on good ground on that, but we got to do a deep dive on that. But you know what? If we got to fight him in federal court, we got to fight him in federal court, and we'll just go that route. So we'll file our motion to remand, and then we'll fight the motion to transfer at the same time. That's what's going to happen over the next 30 days.
I mean, literally, you couldn't write it any better, because ultimately, if none of that goes our way, then the question of whether or not Facebook can slap a muzzle on Texans will be decided by an unelected, unaccountable federal judge in California.
I know, right?
Yeah, and if that doesn't make the list of reasons for TEXIT, nothing will.
Yeah, I know, right? It could really play right into your favor. And you were talking about legislative issues. I think before I got to look at what you're talking about with Jared Patterson, because he's actually my representative. I don't know what he did or said, but
Well, he
I
says you don't
imagine it probably wasn't
exist,
good.
but that's okay.
Well, I
Yeah,
don't exist, or the Texas Nationalist movement doesn't exist.
well, people who support TEXIT, I mean, there's only 2 of them in his district, according to
Oh,
him. So he's spoken to both of
okay.
them. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
I see how that
whatever.
goes. So yeah, well
Yeah.
that's
Well, we'll get
fun.
to that. All right.
Well,
Paul,
I was gonna say though, but
yeah.
remind your Texas legislators to make it clear in this law. We just need one little insert into this HB 20. These lawsuits shall be in the state of Texas. Just make it explicit. It seems pretty clear, but we don't want any wiggle room. So we need to fix that.
That sounds like a job for Briscoe Kane.
Yeah, well, hit him up. Do it.
Okay. Hey, Paul, I
Awesome.
appreciate you, man. Thank you very much, and thanks for jumping on here. One more time, where can everybody find you on social media?
It's at Fired Up TX Lawyer, and I'm on all platforms. The main one I do is Instagram and Twitter. I'm also pretty active on Getter, so I'll see y'all there, hopefully.
All right, Paul. Thank you so much, buddy.
All right. Thanks, Daniel.
Okay, guys, so there you heard it. A far more eloquent explanation than I could ever give. So that's the status of the Facebook lawsuit. So great news. They dropped the restriction of posting texitnow.org and all the associated links. But there is still more fight left because we're not gonna let their slander continue, and their disparagement has to be paid for, and we're going to fight until we make them pay. All right. Hey, without further ado, it is time to bring on our second guest. Again, like I said, 2 guests, right? And this one was like a sequel to the webinar earlier this week. He's been hanging out very patiently as we get through this business, but we've got him for the duration of tonight's coffee talk. So I'd like to bring back Dr. Matt Qvortrup. Hey, Doc. Oh, hold on. There we go. Yeah, we've got no sound on you. You're muted. We're going to try to unmute you there. Yeah.
Now, can you hear me now?
There we go. We've got you.
And you can see that I've got very important books in my collection there. And for everybody who hasn't met me before, they will be introduced to somebody who's completely shamelessly trying to flog his own book, which is available on any sensible platform, I think. That was just a commercial break, and now we can continue.
Yeah, no worries at all. Yeah, and we'll talk about the book. So for those of you that were not on the webinar Monday night, Dr. Matt Qvortrup, he's a professor of political science at Coventry University in the UK. He's a professor of constitutional law at the Australian National University.
We'll do an advert for them too.
There you go. So he's got his coffee. He came prepared, people. He brought his coffee.
Tea, actually. I am British, but
well,
fine.
Okay. Well, but it's late night coffee talk for us, but it's tea. Okay. I got it. Okay. Well, so anyway, to continue on, he's a lawyer, political scientist, prolific author. He's worked and consulted with 16 and now 17 independence movements around the world. He's got a brand new book called I Want to Break Free, a practical guide to making a new country. And we had him for a full hour, almost an hour and a half Monday night, just kind of taking a lot of questions, talking about the steps that are necessary. And one of the webinars that we've received the most feedback on, it was phenomenal, so much that the doctor called immediately after and said, hey, let's do this again. Said, okay, how about Wednesday night at Coffee Talk? So here he is. He's back and he is ready for your questions. So do we just want to dive into the questions?
I'll rock and roll. Yeah, please.
Okay. Well, look, we'll softball it. Here you go. Beverly wants to know, what's the time difference between Texas and Dr. Qvortrup? It must be late/early as heck in his neck of the woods.
No. I am perfect for Texas, actually. because here it is 25 to 3 in the afternoon. I could show you around if you don't believe me. So the sun is shining outside. I am so this is actually perfect timing for me. It's neither too early nor too late. So I'm fully tuned in at Texas time.
Yeah, it's a little unsettling for you to swing the camera around and I see daylight coming through the window.
Well, that's a global world for you, because and which is another point. You know, I believe in this thing called localization. Things can be local in small areas, like I mean, Texas is not a small area, but relatively, defined areas, geographically smaller areas, can be part of a greater world,
Yeah.
and that's what we're part of now. That's why. Some people in Scotland talks about an independent Scotland in the united world, and that's sort of like the. I think it's an interesting movement. It's interesting that the philosopher Fichte, a German philosopher, who invented the word nationalism. Nationalism sometimes gets a bad press, and people think they're violence and so on. It's got nothing to do with that. But he says, in order to be totally cosmopolitan, you need to know yourself. And that's, I think, is a very profound point. Sorry if I'm being philosophical here at late at night.
No, look, that's why we're here, and it's interesting to hear you say that, because that actually ties into our next question. But I think you and I have talked about this. The thing that stuck in my mind when I wound up crossing my proverbial line in the sand in 1996 was that book that I mentioned by John Nesbitt. Yeah, it's kind of a soft book. It's not an academic work, but that book, Global Paradox, and that's really what he talked about. He talked about how the world's economies were becoming more integrated, but that was fueling this self-determination. So really the thesis of the entire book was that the world's trends point overwhelmingly toward political independence on one hand and economic interdependence on the other. And it was essentially the fact that the telecommunications revolution had opened up the world for trade. I can go online and buy Marmite if I wanted to. And that's not a product that I could normally get on the shelves here. And whether it's telecommunication services, goods, whatever it is, trade has really made the world more economically interdependent, which has also meant that the world's smallest countries can be some of the largest players.
Yes.
And level the playing field. So it's interesting to hear you say that. Let me throw this one out. Melinda Liu says, and this is sort of a tie-in, are or is there differences between the legal definitions of country and nation? Thank you for all your work. This is one that you and I actually talked about the first time we had a conversation, which is that if people really understood the differences between the terms country, nation, and state, they might begin to look at politics in the world in a little different light.
Yes. So I think we can just sort of take it. And I apologize if I come across as being sort of like an academic type. I mean, that's sort of that's my job, really, and with two hats on, really. So this might sound a little bit sort of theoretical, but the word nation, which of course has some long Latin history we won't tie you with. Nation is basically the idea of a country, but just politicized. So there have been countries for a long time. There have been ideas of cultures, if you like, but it's when those ideas that are cultural are becoming political, when the cultural manifestations of a country become a political force, then you have a nation. So a place like Scotland has a culture which is about reading Robert Burns and wearing the kilt and throwing logs and doing all sorts of things. But it's when the people who share that culture also decide that they share a political, they have a political common denominator, that they have common political aspirations, then you move from being a country to being a nation. And then the other thing is a state. So we have countries which exist, and when countries become politically aware and get political aspirations, then they become a nation. Now, what then is a state? So that other definition was it was a historical and political definition, philosophical, if you like. The state is a legal definition, The state has been defined in many ways, but in international law, which is one of the areas that I dabble in, a state is a place that fulfills 4 different criteria. A state has a defined territory, it has a defined population, it is able to perform the functions of a public sector, that is, arrest criminals, raise taxes, do the things, all the mundane things that states do. And then fourthly, and this is very important, do them on its own accord and its own right. So if you have a country that is effectively a puppet state, like Donbass in eastern Ukraine, which this person, Vladimir Putin, claims to be part of Russia, and he's totally wrong about that, then he is wrong about it, because Donbass, yes, it has defined territory, it has defined population. It might even be able to hand out, welfare checks and arrest criminals and so on, but it is not there by its own force. So a state is a legal definition, defined territory, defined population, ability to perform the functions of a state and do those independently, whereas a nation is the more philosophical or historical concept of a culture that has common political aspirations.
Okay, there you go. All right, thank you for that. All right, let's see what else we've got in here. We've got some more TEXIT specific ones, and we'll get to those here in a moment. Let's take a look. Oh, you know what? I forgot. We're getting questions in via email. Sorry about
that's very 1990s, isn't it?
I know it's, but it happens. We keep it open.
I would send a letter, of course, Daniel, but that's how 1974 I am, I suppose. But
well, I will tell you. You and I've talked about Dr. Naylor before, and I know the people who view the live streams. I talk about him quite a bit, but Dr. Naylor, as the founder of the Second Vermont Republic, the Green Mountains. He barely communicated with me, almost never via email. Second on occasion, or really kind of the third method was by telephone. But more than that, I got letters from him every 3 or 4 days, and he would write in a green felt tip pen. I mean, he was on brand.
Well, I think that's very modernist. I write with a fountain pen, as you can see here. I've moved on from quilts, but anyway.
Okay, so you've seen some of the blow up on social media, because you've actually been tied up in it, and I think that this has been probably generated from that kerfuffle. I've seen people say, and there's no name or city on this, so I don't know. I've seen people say that this will lead to civil war. How can the doctor speak to that based on other independence movements around the world throughout history?
Yes, so
I'm almost positive we covered that a little bit during the webinar, but apparently it's come up again. So.
No, it's important, and it's not everybody will follow everything, and it's important to stress this a number of times, because it often comes up. And when I've been around in advising in 17 countries and traveling to 25 different countries in independence movement, it always comes up. Mm-hmm. I think it's a very simple answer to that. And the very simple answer is, if you divide the world into developed nations, developed democracies, or lesser developed non-democratic countries, then the places where you find violence are the non-democratic, authoritarian, underdeveloped states. So when you've had independence movements in places like Ethiopia, in Eritrea, in South Sudan, to a degree in Colombia, then you have a lot of violence, because people aren't socialized into dealing with things in a peaceful way. When you look at other countries where they've had independence movements and have indeed succeeded in getting a country independent, such as when Norway seceded from Sweden a little over 100 years ago, such as when Iceland about 70 years ago seceded from Denmark, such as when um, Malta seceded from the United Kingdom in the 1960s, then there was no violence. There was no violence when Scotland tried, and unsuccessfully at that stage, to vote for independence from the United Kingdom. So violence isn't. It just does not happen in these cases. If you have countries where they are not trained to have so democracy is best taught by practicing it. And in America, you've had, almost 250 years now. What would it be? 246 years of democracy, more or less. Imperfect at times, but in America, people learned or have learned the art of listening to better arguments, the art of being persuaded, the art of presenting facts as part of the debate. That's the thing you don't have in countries that don't have that democratic history. In Scotland, we've had the same history of democracy. Malta having been part of the UK, the same. Canada.
Well, we've the doc is frozen. We'll see if we can get him back here in a second. He'll pop back on, and as soon as he does, we'll hear him. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, while the doc is getting his internet situation squared away, let me go ahead and send out some thank yous. Let's do this. Thank you to Lee Jacobson for his super chat. Lee, thank you very much. And thank you to Susan Williamson, who says, let's go win. Thank you so much for that. For those of you who don't know super chats, you can do those in the YouTube chat on the TNM's YouTube channel. So if you'd like to do that, go ahead and head over there and do that. Thank you, Susan. Okay, here we go. Don't know how to pronounce that. Penage 58. Thank you very much for your super chat. We do appreciate it. Donna McClure, $100 super chat. She says, hey, Eric, challenge accepted. Who can knock off the top? I think she's challenging everyone to knock her off of the leaderboard there for contributions for tonight. So Donna, thank you so much for that. And, if I'd have done this in the right order, that would have made a lot more sense. Eric kicked it off with $50 super chat. Thank you so much, Eric. I really do appreciate that. And thank you for challenging folks out there. We're waiting on the doc to get reconnected, so I'll keep going through some of these. Linda says, hang in there, Daniel. We love you. Hey, we love you, right? We're in this together. If you haven't figured it out yet, for those who haven't, this is family for us, right? We will come out of the other side of this once we get and win that referendum, sharing a bond, all of us sharing a bond that other generations, future generations will probably never understand because we're writing history. So thank you for that, Linda. Okay. Paul wants to know, he says, someone please explain how we will avoid the overt government bloat we see in DC. Something we talk about quite often. As a matter of fact, if you go to our YouTube channel, and which you're actually on YouTube, but if you look at our YouTube channel, there's a section called TEXIT 101, and you're going to find a video in there called "How Will TEXIT Help Overcome Electile Dysfunction?" And it's a it's a serious issue, right? But one of the things that you have to look at is particularly, one of the things we have to do is we got to get the federal system out of the equation. It has grown too large, too overbearing, all of those things. But the concern is, what about the government that we have here in Texas? How do we avoid it? Well, you avoid it because, number one, it's a government that's close to you, right? I can drive to Austin in a half a day, right? In a few hours, I can be sitting in Austin, and in my rep's face, it's a smaller area, right? And you may not think that matters, but having government closer to home matters a lot. Whereas now we're dealing with a federal bureaucracy that is faceless, that is essentially nameless, that does not know us, that does not care about us, that exists only to perpetuate itself and to grow. Okay, it's in that way, it's a parasite. Okay, but you also have to look at the fact that when we have these concerns about government here in Texas, you have to look at the source for a lot of those concerns. You can't ignore the fact that the federal system, our relationship with the federal system, adversely impacts the politics here. Go look through some of these elected officials and look at how much of their campaign contributions come from outside of Texas. Well, that's a foreign contribution, right? While they may not consider it so now, Texas as an independent nation, that would absolutely be 100% foreign. And because of that, because it would be 100% foreign, it would be forbidden, because we don't allow campaign contributions from places like China or Russia or any of those other places, right? We don't allow campaign contributions from those places because they're foreign nations, and we don't want foreign nations interfering. And so, you have that factor. You have the fact that our relationship with the federal government means that almost half of the legislation written in Texas has to deal with the federal government, exists only because of the federal government, or has some sort of nexus to the federal system. So there are a lot of reasons, but you take that away, and some of the bloat, some of this drive toward making Texas government more bloated, much larger, all those things, that tendency kind of shrivels. But ultimately, what makes a difference for us is when we are diligent in holding to account our elected officials, and we are vigilant to guard against that sort of thing. Okay. So, Paul, thank you very much for that. Hey, it looks like we've got the good doctor back. Let me go ahead and bring him back on.
Hello, can you hear me, Daniel?
Yep. We got you. All right. I think we're good to go.
Yes, no, I'm sure that Vladimir Putin or some bot has tried to interrupt us, but they ain't going to succeed. I tell you. So, as my strapline is, we are not the last ones of yesterday. We are the first ones of tomorrow, and on we battle. Anyway, I shouldn't wax lyrically there. I should just listen to the questions that are coming in from people and answer them.
Yeah, and I was able to knock a few out while you were gone. So here's a good one, and this really applies. This is one that we get quite often, particularly from people outside of Texas, and it is worth noting there are independence movements in other states of the United States that are moving toward independence. We've talked about it before. New Hampshire, we've talked about California. We've talked about Florida, we've talked about Alaska. So there are many, plus there are some that are not in the United States. Puerto Rico. I mean, we talked about Puerto Rico. We talked about Alberta in Canada, also the Quebecois. We've talked about the 9 northern states of Mexico. So this is that sort of phenomena. But what people ask often when they don't know is really this question. And I'll give it to you here, Doc, and it covers most of the screen, so I have to pull it down. But here's what it says. It says, I know it's in the Texas Constitution where you can proceed in these endeavors. Would it be possible for other states next to you to follow suit, Oklahoma or Arkansas? So, we obviously talk about the absolute right of self-determination to let these people choose their own government. But from an international perspective, looking at these other states, if Texas has the right, don't those states as well?
Yes, they do. I mean, I should probably preface this by saying that I'm an academic. I'm trying to sort of just be fair-minded about these things. I'm not here to say that what people should and should not do. Right. So when I travel around the world and people are asking me exactly those questions, then there's some often sort of misconceptions about the right to self-determination. A lot of people are sort of saying, well, in self-determination cases, it's about the home constitutions. And that's not necessarily the case, because you can sometimes, if you entered into a union that says you can't leave, then then there's a bit of a problem. But there are different ways in which you can leave, but I normally sort of put it up into two different categories. There is what we call domestic law, and then there's what we can call international law. What is international law? And international law is in many ways much more important. And I'll take that first. So international law is that you are a state when you have those criteria that I've talked about before. So to become independent is not so much about the process that leads to that. I mean, I will come back to that. I know that's a question later, but the most important thing is that when you are able to stand on your own 2 feet, other countries have to recognize you. A lot of countries may not like Israel, but Israel was, at some stage, was able to stand on its own 2 feet, and therefore Israel was considered to be, and is considered to be, a state, whether people like it or not. So if Texas were to just to secede and start working as a state, be able to trade and raise taxes and so on, then Texas would, by definition, be a state. A lot of people may not like Cuba, but Cuba, and Cuba has many flaws, but Cuba performs the functions of a state, and whether we like them or not, they are there. Now, the main issue here is if Alabama, if Oklahoma, all of these places could become states. I think there is the legal answer to that, and then there's also the political answer to that. The difference between Texas and these other states is a difference we also see in Germany, for example. So America is not the same. In Germany, the state of Bavaria, sometimes known as the Texas of Germany, is known as the official title of Bavaria is the Free State of Bavaria. Bavaria joined in later the German Union, and on the similar circumstances, roughly at the same time actually as Texas, well, give and take. But the main thing was that was a voluntary agreement. Scotland also entered into a voluntary agreement with the rest of the UK to be part of my country. So at a cultural level, Texas, Scotland, and Bavaria probably have a stronger case than Baden-Württemberg, Oklahoma, or for that matter, Yorkshire, because all those latter examples have never really been functioning states before. Texas, Bavaria, Catalonia, for that matter, or Norway, if we take another example, are places that culturally were states before. Now, sorry if I'm just giving the whole panoply of option here. So there's the international law. That's kind of what you got me on, isn't it? So there's international law. You can do it. There's culturally, Texas will probably have a greater claim than other places. But it's not just about how long you've been around and how long you can trace things back. Fundamentally, democratic countries are based on consent, and they're based on being a voluntary union. So when Scotland, when British politicians are talking about Scotland, they say, well, Scotland's part of a voluntary union. The moment that Scotland does not want to be part of this voluntary union, there has to be found a way around that. Now, a lot of places will try to put up obstacles. In America, the main obstacle is this Supreme Court case from 1868, where Chase, who was a Supreme Court justice, said that Texas just couldn't go. And from a legal point of view, and I know you've been tweeting about this, you say that I would give him a D or an E, the the Chief Justice at the time. And the reason why that particular case is just really sort of poor craftsmanship from a legal point of view is that he based the decision ultimately on the Articles of Confederation, which was the quasi-constitution that existed before the Philadelphia Constitution, the current Constitution of the United States. And you can't base a law on a law that has already been superseded by another law. So that's just poor craftsmanship. So therefore, the legal basis for Texas not being able to secede is a poorly drafted judgment. And I think if this were to be dealt with in a fair-minded way by the U.S. Supreme Court, they could overturn this in the same way as Roe versus Wade was overturned recently.
Yeah, it's interesting. You've obviously seen some of that out there, and I literally had someone try to argue today that Texas was still bound under one of its previous constitutions, the post-Civil War Constitution that came between the Civil War and the Constitution that we have now. They tried to argue that we were still under that, and it's, you know, some people, look, Doc, let's just be honest. Some people just need to crack the books before they tweet.
Well, yes, they do, and I think that's sort of like the reason why they tweet before they're a little bit too trigger happy, which is not always a good thing.
Yes.
Or Twitter happy, I suppose. But I think that the main thing is, and this is probably more a political point than a legal point, that if a country really wants to succeed in seceding, then they normally find a way, and in democratic countries they find a way which is peaceful.
Yeah, and ultimately it takes as long as it takes as long as you let it take, right?
Well, yes, and obviously, I mean, that's one of the things I say in my book, which is up there, and I haven't advertised before. You can also read this book by Daniel. But one of the things that we both say in our book is that, you know, this is a longer process. You have to be in from the long haul, but you also have to, you know, this is a bare knuckle fight. You need to, you know, if you really want to win, you may have to have a, you know, pull a fast one every now and then. Politics is about passion. Politics is about the. There was a Swedish Prime Minister called Olof Palme, who sadly was killed in the 1980s. And Olof Palme's motto was "Politics is to will." And I think we should. That can be pronounced very beautifully in Swedish, which I won't even attempt to try. But politics is to will. I'll try actually. Politik är att vilja in Swedish. Then you can practice your Swedish at home. I'm sure there are loads of Texans who are of Swedish origin. But politics is to will, and it is that you know, single focus is what takes you over that line in the sand, to use metaphor.
Yeah, and I will tell you, you know, one of the things that one of the pieces of feedback that we got, and we're getting close to wrap up because I know we've had you on. we're in the overtime officially now, so folks, don't worry, we're getting there.
Yeah, no, it's a bit like the soccer World Cup. You sometimes have 11 minutes of overtime, and then you score on penalties at the end.
Oh, I know. Yeah. So, so one of the pieces of feedback we got was about something you talked about a 10-year timeline. You know, 10 years. I think someone had asked the question during the webinar, and they had asked, and you had said that, you know, about 10 years. You know, you and I had talked after the webinar, and had actually talked a little bit about some of that feeling from folks that they may like, hey, we don't really think that we've got 10 years. But, you know, I think that really kind of dovetails into what we were just talking about then, which is you saying that it's bare knuckles, and ultimately the timeline is really dependent both on external circumstances and internal motivation. Would you agree with that statement?
I will, yes, and sometimes the timeline can be slightly longer than that. I think it might have been a little bit of a fast one for me to say 10 years, because that's slightly arbitrary. With a good wind and everything else, and it can be done in 10 years. I remember 15 years ago, somebody suggested I should write an opinion piece about a thing that became known as Brexit, and it was known as complete pie in the sky. I've written a couple of books about referendums, and that was unthinkable at that time, and that happened then 10 years after that. But when Norway wanted to secede from Sweden, it took them 25 years. The Icelandics tried for 10 years again. But you know, you have different. It took about 35 years to the country, you know, to get the Austrians to give up territory there, so they can come back to Italy. I think the most important thing in getting a country to become independent is to have friends in high places, be able to play your cards right, to make sure that you have support from other actors. It's a mistake a lot of people make. About this. It's they would just about what happens with
Doc, you're breaking up pretty badly. Do we
you hear
have?
me now?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we have you back. It was breaking up pretty badly.
I
So
can keep talking. So can you hear me now, Daniel?
yep, I think we're stable semi. So
Okay. What I will say is that you need to think about allies, not just at home, but also abroad. And then the point I would like to hammer home is one that you mentioned earlier, is that you need to pressure your own politicians to see them, or to get them to understand that they cannot continue in their jobs as politicians unless they support the people, they follow the
yeah.
people.
Well, and look, I think that's ultimately the bottom line. I think when you begin to slap timetables on sort of predictions on when these things start to happen, none of us has a crystal ball. We never know what external or internal circumstances are going to speed up or slow it down. But I think it really depends on where you begin to count what that timeline looks like. And and it's odd because I think about this interview that I saw with Sergei Popovich, who led the movement that toppled Milosevic. And, he said that the mainstream media would look at what happened at the Serbian elections where essentially Milosevic was toppled and say, well, it happened overnight. He said they didn't talk about the 10 years ahead of time and the 5 separate major campaigns that they ran to get to that point. They only saw the tail end of the process. And I think that's ultimately what's important here is if we're following a process and we're following a plan, how we get from one stage to the next, in the time in which we get, whatever that distance is, whatever that run is between the step you're at and the next step, is really dependent upon a lot of factors. And I think one of those is the internal motivation of the people to get it done. Ultimately, we know if it's, like you're talking about, which is we've got to make absolutely sure that these politicians understand that we're here to win, and they can either get on the train or get run over by it. Then, ultimately what that takes is a mass number of people. And it takes enough political will, enough political power in sufficient numbers to make that happen. We talk about it all the time, Doc, and we'll leave this as the last question before we do the wrap up. But we talk about it all the time. Article 1, Section 2 of the Texas Constitution says that starts with the words, all political power is inherent in the people. And internally in the organization, we put a tremendous amount of focus on outreach to Texas voters. How central is connecting and creating a mass movement of people to the success of independence movements in your estimation through history and directly for the independence movements you've consulted with?
The most important thing is that part of the Constitution is more important politically than it is legally. Legally, you can end up in you can get lawyers to say anything really. That's not the issue. The issue is that you need to fire people up to get people to get the sense of a destiny. I've mentioned all these examples, and people can look them up, and they can. I in my book, I have a whole sort of history section of all these places. But the common denominator in all of them is that you need to get the popular support, not in a way that sort of rises up from the bottom. You need to fire. And there has to be an organization that fires the people up, that, as it were, educates them, sort of like the vanguard of the party, as they would have said in Russia, I think, and people who spearhead that and are able to get people behind them. And getting people behind them is by telling the story. Now, any good film has a plot. This is the story of your destiny. This is a film of your destiny. It has to have a very simple plot, and that plot is freedom. And for people who are from Texas and people more generally from America, there is no greater storyline than the story of unfolding of freedom. History, it has been said, is the unfolding of human freedom. And you have to, that is the thing, the wave that carries history forward. You need to show to people, you need to get them to feel that they are surfing on that wave of freedom that is history. And once you get that feeling, you're on the right track and you'll be moving forward. But you need to be able to tell that story. So any kind of legal arguments and all of those sort of things, that's fine, and they have a purpose. But the main thing is to get the poetry in, to get people to sing from the same hymn sheet. Sometimes literally. That's why you have national anthems. That's why you have music. That's why you fire people up by culture. That culture has to be politicized. And when that happened, as it happened in Italy 150 years ago, as it happened in Norway 100 years ago, and it happened in Iceland 70 years ago, and as it happened in Ukraine at the moment, it is that feeling that where you cannot be broken. It is that feeling that you need if you want to become an independent country. If you can't get that, then you might as well do something, easy like astrophysics or higher level mathematics. Things that anybody can do. Creating a new state is infinitely more difficult than quantum physics or learning ancient Greek. But if you have a quiet life and you want to learn ancient Greek or quantum physics, then go ahead. If you want to have a challenge, create a movement for freedom, and you'll be on your way.
Well, that will be the last word on that. Obviously, everyone, Dr. Matt Qvortrup. Hey, and let me just say how much I really appreciate you coming back on for some overtime. I mean, I'm sure our people will be seeing you again. We will have you on as often as we can, perhaps some additional webinars and follow-ups. I mean, there's a ton of opportunity here, but Doc, we really do appreciate you. And really thank you for taking the time out. You have been very, very gracious, and we cannot thank you enough. So thank you, Doc.
Thank you. Humbly, thank you.
Okay, everyone. That'll be a wrap for tonight. Let's go ahead and, like I said, we're in overtime. So I've got to do a quick run through, and then we're going to let everyone bounce out of here tonight. But thanks for joining us, sharing a cup of coffee. You got to see Paul, our attorney. You got to ask some more questions, Dr. Qvortrup. I mean, what an amazing, amazing career that he has had, and just such an amazing wealth of knowledge. And I'm excited to see what this relationship does. Right, where this goes. There are academics out there, as we have said all along, that believe in the right of self-determination, that believe that understand this from a practical perspective. And Dr. Qvortrup is one of those, and we appreciate him so very much. All right. As we wrap up, just a reminder, before you head out of here, if you haven't done it already, head over to tnm.me/vote to pledge your support. It's tnm.me/vote. Pledge your support today. The numbers matter. You heard the doc talking about it. The numbers absolutely matter. So go pledge your support. It's absolutely free, right? Contrary to what some knotheads say on the internet. But it is absolutely free. So head over to tnm.me/vote. If you would like to become a dues paying member, get any type of membership, we have a whole list of different types of memberships that do different things. You can find out more about that at tnm.me/join. That is tnm.me/join. And of course, if you'd like to help us make TEXIT happen faster, head over to tnm.me/volunteer. All right. My friends, that is a wrap for tonight. I'm going to leave you, as I do every single solitary week, with not my words, but the words of Sam Houston when he said that Texas will again lift its head and stand among the nations. I believe that time is now. And the question is, will you stand with her? Good night, everyone.
Texas, all hail the mighty state. Texas, our Texas, so wonderful, so great. Boldest and grandest, standing every test. Oh, empire wide and glorious, you stand supremely blessed. God bless you, Texas, and keep you brave and strong, that you may grow in power and worth throughout the ages long.